The central spire of Neuter City gleamed in the triple sunlight, its biometal hybrid architecture twisting impossibly toward the sky. To most inhabitants of the Federation, the sight was awe-inspiring, a testament to the cooperative achievement of dozens of peaceful species. To Husser, it looked structurally unsound. They could have at least consulted a Trodarian engineer, he muttered, adjusting the ceremonial cloak draped across his broad shoulders. The fabric chafed against his scales, another concession to Federation diplomacy that irritated him. Our buildings may not be pretty, but they don't sway in a moderate breeze. It's not swaying, it's breathing, his sister Hagra corrected. Her scales, a shade lighter than his deep crimson, caught the sunlight as she gestured toward the spire. The outer membrane contains photosynthetic organisms that process carbon dioxide and generate 15% of the building's energy needs. It's quite fascinating, actually. Husser grunted. Hagra and her endless scientific curiosity. Still, her intelligence made her a valuable member of their diplomatic contingent, even if she lacked the proper Trodarian appreciation for strength and power. Fascinating or not, it looks weak. Ysara cut in, her darker scales rippling with barely contained energy as she walked beside them. Like everything else on this planet, she bared her teeth in what could generously be called a smile, but more closely resembled a predator's snarl. Husser reached out and squeezed his mate's shoulder affectionately. Ysara had the proper Trodarian spirit, aggressive, proud, and always ready for a challenge. Her presence made these diplomatic missions bearable. As they proceeded down the boulevard toward the Federation Council chambers, Husser noted with satisfaction how the crowd parted before them. Various herbivore species scattered at their approach, glasswings with their transparent abdomens, scurrying harups with their enormous eyes wide with fear. Even the towering fronds bent their leafy appendages away to avoid proximity to the Trodarians. "Look at them scatter," Ysara whispered, her voice thick with amusement. "Like frightened prey." "They are prey," Husser replied softly, though loud enough to elicit a nervous trill from a nearby glasswing. "We're apex predators from the deadliest world in the Federation. They're right to fear us." It wasn't mere boasting. Trodaria was classified by the Federation as a death world, a planet with environmental conditions so harsh that most sentient species would perish within hours of arrival. Triple gravity, toxic atmosphere components, extreme temperature fluctuations, and predators that would make the fiercest Federation security forces faint with terror. Yet such conditions had forged the Trodarians into the galaxy's ultimate survivors. Thick-scaled, muscular, with regenerative abilities and immune systems that laughed at most pathogens. No wonder the softer species gave them wide berth. In the entire history of the Federation, no other sentient species had evolved on a death world. The Trodarians stood alone, unique in their strength, unchallenged at the top of the galactic food chain. Or so they had always believed. "Have you heard the rumors?" Hagra asked suddenly, her voice dropping to ensure privacy. "About the new species seeking Federation membership?" Husser frowned. "Another race of diplomats and traitors, no doubt. What of them?" "They're saying these newcomers are also Death World evolved," Hagra continued, her eyes bright with scientific interest. "They call themselves humans." Ysara let out a barking laugh that caused several harups to flee into a nearby shop. "Impossible. No other Death World has produced sentient life. It's statistically improbable." "Improbable, not impossible," Hagra countered. "And I've heard their world has only slightly lower gravity than Trodaria, with similarly diverse biomes and predators." Husser waved a dismissive hand. "Exaggerations. Every new species tries to present themselves as more impressive than they are. Remember the Quillians? They claimed to be formidable warriors until one of them fainted during our welcoming roar. But as they approached the Grand Council chambers, Husser couldn't help but feel a flicker of curiosity. Another Death World species? It seemed unlikely. Yet if true, it would change everything. "We'll know soon enough," he said, squaring his shoulders as they reached the ornate entrance. "If these humans are truly what they claim, they'll be at today's reception." The Federation Grand Reception Hall was designed to accommodate beings of vastly different sizes, atmospheric requirements, and social customs. Floating platforms allowed avian species to perch at comfortable heights, while aquatic delegates circulated in mobile water tanks. Temperature-controlled zones created pockets of freezing cold or sweltering heat for species that required them. For the Trodarians, the Federation had arranged a reinforced section of flooring to support their weight in the artificial gravity. It was an accommodation they resented, a constant reminder of their difference, but one they tolerated in the name of diplomacy. Ambassador Grealish requests your presence at the central podium in 15 minutes. A mechanical translator drone informed Husser. The trade agreement signing will proceed according to schedule. Husser acknowledged with a sharp nod, then turned to his companions. I need to review the final terms. Hagara, collect any scientific journals you need for your research proposal. Yes, Sara. I know, his mate grumbled. Don't challenge anyone to combat. Don't bare my teeth at the herbivores, and try not to break anything. She flexed her clawed hands. These diplomatic functions are torture. They're necessary, Husser corrected. The mineral rights on Sector 7 will triple our adamantium production. Just endure for a few hours. As they separated to prepare for the formal proceedings, Husser became aware of an unusual disturbance across the hall. The normal flow of diplomats and officials seemed to be creating a wide berth around something, or someone, just as they typically did for Trodarians. Curious, Husser shifted his position for a better view, and that's when he saw them. There were 3 of them, standing casually in the cleared space. They were bipedal, similar to several Federation species, but there was something immediately different about these beings. They had no visible scales, feathers, or exoskeletons, just some kind of smooth outer covering that Husser initially mistook for an environmental suit. But no, that appeared to be their actual skin, in various shades of tan and brown. More striking was their bearing. While they lacked the obvious predatory features of Trodarians, no visible claws, no razor teeth, no armored hide, they carried themselves with unmistakable confidence. It was the posture of apex predators, the easy stance of those unaccustomed to fear. And the crowd was giving them the same wide berth normally reserved for Trodarians. Humans, Hagara whispered, suddenly at his side. Her eyes were wide with scientific fascination. It has to be. Husser watched as one of the humans, taller than the others with dark fur on its face, laughed at something. The sound was surprisingly similar to a Trodarian's amused growl, though higher in pitch. The other delegates nearby visibly flinched at the sound. They don't look like much, Ysara commented, joining them. No natural weapons that I can see. Soft-looking. Why is everyone avoiding them? Pheromones, perhaps, Hagara suggested. Or maybe an evolutionary adaptation we can immediately perceive. Fascinating. Before Husser could respond, the tallest human turned its head, as if sensing their scrutiny. For a long moment, dark eyes met Husser's slitted yellow ones across the room. There was no fear in that gaze, only equal assessment, a predator recognizing another. The human's mouth curved upward slightly in what Husser recognized as a smile, though without the threatening display of teeth that Trodarians included in their own. Then, with a slight nod of acknowledgement, the human turned back to its companions. Did you see that? Ysara hissed, her scales darkening with emotion. It nodded at you, as if we were equals. Perhaps we are, Hagara murmured, her scientific brain already cataloging observations. Their planet's classification is technically Death World Class A, while Trodaria is Death World Class A plus A. The difference is minimal. Husser felt something he had rarely experienced in Federation space: uncertainty. For generations, Trodarians had enjoyed their unique status. They were the exception, the evolutionary marvel, the species that had conquered impossible odds. Their diplomatic and trade advantages stemmed largely from their reputation as the galaxy's sole Death World inhabitants. If these humans were indeed what they appeared to be, a second species forged in the crucible of a Death World, everything would change. We need more information, he decided. After the signing ceremony, we'll find a way to assess these newcomers properly. The formal proceedings went as planned, though Husser found his attention divided. The trade agreement was signed, speeches were given, and pleasantries exchanged, but his eyes kept drifting to the human delegation positioned across the chamber. They seemed to be observing the Trodarians with equal interest. When the ceremonial portion concluded and the reception shifted to its more casual phase, Husser guided his group through the crowd, intending to casually intercept the humans. Before they could reach them, however, Ambassador Grealish, a tall frond with glistening leaf patterns, intercepted them. Uza. Excellent work today, the ambassador burbled, swaying slightly as was typical of his species. The council is most pleased with the agreement. I understand you'll be staying on Neuter for a few more cycles before returning to Trodaria? Yes, Ambassador. My sister has research to conduct at the Central Archive. Splendid, splendid. The frond's leaves rippled with apparent delight. Oh, and I see you've noticed our newest prospective members. He gestured discreetly toward the humans. Fascinating species, from a planet called Earth. Quite a harsh world by all accounts. So we've heard, Husser replied carefully. Perhaps you could introduce us? As fellow harsh world species, we might have much in common. The ambassador's leaves stilled momentarily, and Husser could almost see the diplomatic calculations running through his mind. Putting the two predator species together could either be brilliant or disastrous. Perhaps at a more appropriate time, Grealish hedged. Today is for celebration, not for potential incidents. Ysara growled softly, insulted, but Husser placed a restraining hand on her arm. Of course, Ambassador. Another time. As Grealish moved away, visibly relieved, Hagara leaned closer. He's afraid we'll fight them. Or ally with them, Husser replied, suddenly understanding. The Federation has always been able to manage us because we're outnumbered. Two Deathworld species working together? That would shift the balance of power considerably. The reception continued into the evening, with elaborate refreshments catering to the diverse digestive requirements of the attendees. Trodarians were primarily carnivores, requiring high-protein, mineral-rich nutrients that the Federation caterers provided in synthetic form. Never quite as satisfying as fresh prey, but diplomatically necessary. The humans, Husser noticed, appear to be consuming both plant matter and what looked like meat products. Omnivores, then. Adaptable. It was at the refreshment station that the inevitable finally occurred. Husser, obtaining drinks for his group, found himself standing beside the tall human he had exchanged glances with earlier. Up close, the being was less impressive physically than a Trodarian. Smaller, lacking obvious natural defenses, yet still conveyed a subtle aura of danger that most Federation species clearly perceived. Seems we're the only ones comfortable at this table, the human said in perfect standard, nodding toward the wide, empty space surrounding them both. Its voice was deep, but not as resonant as a Trodarian's. Husser measured his response carefully. Most species find predators unsettling. Even artificial meat makes them nervous, the human agreed with a small curve of its lips. Lucas Blackwood, Earth Delegation. It extended a hand, five-fingered with dull, flat claws that seemed almost useless for combat. After a moment's hesitation, Husser mimicked the gesture, careful not to pierce the human's seemingly fragile skin with his own sharp claws. Husser, Trodarian Diplomatic Corps. With me are my sister Hagara and my mate Ysura. The human nodded respectfully to each of them. My colleagues, Samantha Reeves, our scientific attaché, and Igor Volkov, security specialist. The female human had shorter head fur and calculating eyes that reminded Husser of Hagara's scientific gaze. The other male was broader, with visible muscle definition even beneath their strange artificial skins. We've heard much about Trodarians, the female, Samantha said. Your adaptations to high gravity and toxic environments are particularly impressive. And we've heard rumors of your world, Hagara replied, her scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic caution. Class A Deathworld status is rare. Earth has its challenges, Lucas acknowledged. Though, I understand Trodaria makes our world look like a vacation resort. A what? Ysara asked, brow ridge furrowed. A pleasure destination, Igor explained, his accent different from his companions. A place soft species go to relax. The subtle competitive jab was not lost on Husser. So, these humans consider themselves tough, but acknowledge Trodarians might be tougher. Interesting. Perhaps we could continue this discussion in a more comfortable setting, Lucas suggested, glancing around at the herbivore species, giving them a wide berth. There's only so much diplomatic small talk one can endure. Ysara perked up immediately. You have something specific in mind? The human's expression shifted to something Husser couldn't quite interpret. Mischievous, perhaps? There's an establishment called the Everything Tavern not far from here. Caters to all species, including those with more robust constitutions. Husser considered the invitation. It was unusual, potentially risky from a diplomatic standpoint. But the opportunity to assess these humans more thoroughly was too valuable to pass up. We would be interested, he decided. After the reception concludes? Lucas nodded. Meet us at the south exit at the 19th hour. We'll show you the way. As the humans moved away to rejoin their delegation, Ysara leaned in excitedly. A tavern. Finally, something interesting on this bland planet. It's not for entertainment, Husser cautioned, though he couldn't deny his own curiosity. This is reconnaissance. We need to understand what these humans are truly capable of. Hagara's eyes gleamed with scientific anticipation. Their physiological adaptations must be fascinating. No obvious defensive features, yet they've survived a death world. I wonder what hidden advantages they possess. We'll find out soon enough, Husser replied, watching the humans across the chamber. One way or another, the Everything Tavern lived up to its name. Located in Neuter City's less reputable district, away from the gleaming spires and diplomatic quarters, it was a sprawling establishment with segregated atmospheric zones, gravity adjustments, and temperature variants to accommodate virtually any sentient species in the Federation. Its clientele was similarly diverse: traders, mercenaries, spacers, and others who operated on the fringes of Federation society. Species that rarely mixed in more formal settings found common ground here in the pursuit of intoxication and entertainment. When the Trodarians arrived, escorted by the human delegation, the tavern's host, a multi-limbed Xerxian with stress-mottled skin, visibly trembled. 6 apex predators at once, the host muttered, antennae twitching nervously. Universe preserve us. I'll need to rearrange the seating chart. We require a private area, Lucas informed the flustered host, with reinforced seating for our Trodarian friends. Yes, of course, the Xerxian agreed hastily. The Crimson Alcove is available. Triple gravity rated flooring, sound dampening, and a dedicated server drone, so other patrons won't have to interact. As they followed the host through the crowded main floor, Husser noticed how the other patrons reacted to their passing. The Trodarians, as usual, inspired immediate withdrawal, bodies pressing back against walls, conversations halting mid-sentence, drinks clutched tightly. But the humans elicited a similar, if slightly less pronounced, response. The Crimson Alcove was a semi-enclosed booth far from the main activity, with reinforced seating and a table made from some metallic compound that even Trodarian claws would have difficulty scratching. The illumination was dim, comfortable for both species' predatory eyes, and the background noise muted enough for conversation. Not our first time here, Igor explained as they settled in. The proprietor knows us. You been on Neuter long? Hagara inquired, adjusting herself on the reinforced bench. 3 standard months, Samantha replied. Enough time to learn our way around while the Federation debates our membership application. A serving drone hovered to their table, its optical sensors flickering between the 2 predator species with machine confusion. Welcome to the Everything Tavern. What is your pleasure? Start with your strongest Terran whiskey, Lucas told the drone. A bottle for the table. And whatever our friends typically enjoy. Trodarian blood wine, Husser decided, choosing their traditional fermented beverage. The genuine article, not the diluted version served at diplomatic functions. The drone processed this, lights blinking. Warning: Terran whiskey contains ethanol, a neurotoxin harmful to many species. Trodarian blood wine contains compounds lethal to 97% of Federation races. Shall I proceed with these orders? Yes. Both Lucas and Husser confirmed simultaneously, then exchanged amused glances. As the drone departed, Ysara leaned forward, her scales darkening with excitement. So humans, what makes Earth such a deadly world? No natural armor that I can see. No significant claws or fangs. Ysara, Husser cautioned, but Lucas waved off the concern. It's a fair question. We don't look impressive compared to you. The human gestured to Ysara's muscular scaled form. Earth's threats are more diverse than singular. Extreme climate variations from Arctic to desert within short distances. Thousands of predator species. Microorganisms that evolved alongside us, constantly adapting to overcome our defenses. Our primary advantage is adaptability, Samantha continued. Omnivorous diet, endurance-based hunting, tool used from early evolution, and highly effective pattern recognition for threat assessment. And remarkable resistance to toxins, Igor added, as the drone returned with their drinks, which you're about to witness. The serving drone placed a bottle of amber liquid and several small glasses before the humans, then a decanter of thick, dark crimson fluid, resembling fresh blood, but with a distinctive fermented aroma, before the Trodarians. Husser poured the traditional drink for his group, while Lucas handled the human beverage. The Trodarian raised his glass in the customary manner. To new acquaintances, he offered a neutral diplomatic toast. Lucas raised his own glass, the amber liquid catching the low light. To fellow survivors of impossible worlds. They drank. The blood wine was perfectly prepared, rich, minerally, with the familiar burn that spread warmth through Husser's dense musculature. He watched with interest as the humans consumed their own beverage. Smooth, Igor commented, though Husser noticed a slight watering of the human's eyes. What exactly is whiskey? Hagarah asked, her scientific curiosity evident. Fermented grain, distilled and aged, Samantha explained. The ethanol content is around 40%, though this particular brand might be higher. Ethanol, Hagarah's eyes widened. But that's a potent neurotoxin and cellular disruptor. Yes, Lucas confirmed calmly, pouring another round for his group. Most species find it rapidly fatal. We find it recreational. Ysara's scales rippled with surprise and competitive interest. You deliberately consume poison. For pleasure. Don't you? Igor countered, gesturing to their blood wine, which contained compounds that would kill most Federation species within minutes. A moment of understanding passed between them. Two species that thrived on substances lethal to others, both forged in environments that had forced them to incorporate toxins into their biochemistry rather than succumb to them. Perhaps, Husser suggested, feeling a rare sense of kinship. We should compare our homeworlds more directly. What specific gravity does Earth have? Approximately 1 g by Federation standard, Lucas replied. I understand Trodaria is around 3 g. 3.2, Hagarah corrected, which explains our denser muscle and bone structure. Earth compensates with greater environmental diversity, Samantha noted. From Arctic regions reaching minus 50 degrees Celsius to deserts exceeding 50 degrees positive, often within the same continental landmass. And your predators? Ysara asked, always interested in combat potential. Your largest? Aquatic ones reach 25 meters, Igor said. Land-based, perhaps 3 to 4 meters for modern species, though our evolutionary history included larger threats. The conversation continued, drinks flowing freely as both species compared the death worlds that had shaped them. Despite their physical differences, Husser was struck by the similarities in their evolutionary responses. Trodarians had developed physical robustness, while humans had evolved remarkable adaptability and toxin resistance. As they ordered a second round of their respective intoxicants, Husser became aware of increased attention from the tavern's other patrons. Whispers and glances were being directed toward their alcove, some curious, others seemingly resentful. "We're causing a stir," he noted quietly to Lucas. The human nodded slightly. Two Deathworld species socializing is unprecedented. Makes them nervous. "They should be nervous," Ysara declared, the blood wine making her typically forthright nature even more pronounced. "Between us, we could take over this entire establishment." Ysara, Husser cautioned, but Igor laughed, a sound surprisingly similar to a Trodarian's amused growl. "She's not wrong," the human security specialist admitted, though perhaps not diplomatic to mention it. Samantha, who had been quieter during the exchanges, suddenly leaned forward. "I propose an experiment," she said, eyes bright with what Husser recognized as scientific mischief, remarkably similar to Hagara's expression when proposing something unorthodox. "What kind of experiment?" Hagara asked, immediately interested. "Cross-species tolerance assessment," Samantha explained. "In plain terms, let's see who can handle whose drinks better." Ysara's scales flushed dark with excitement. "A drinking contest? Between Deathworlders? I accept." Husser should have objected on diplomatic grounds, but the blood wine had dulled his usual caution. Besides, this was precisely the kind of test that would reveal more about human capabilities than any formal exchange. "Terms?" he asked instead. "Simple," Lucas replied, pouring a small glass of blood wine for himself and distributing the whiskey to the Trodarians. "We each try the other's toxin of choice. Last one conscious wins bragging rights for their species." "You should know," Hagara cautioned, her scientific responsibility asserting itself even through the haze of blood wine. "Our metabolisms are significantly different. This could be dangerous for both sides." "That's what makes it interesting," Igor grinned, raising the glass of thick red liquid. "Za zdorovye." The Trodarians examined the amber human liquid cautiously. It smelled astringent, almost medicinal. Husser went first, throwing back the small glass as he had seen Lucas do. The liquid burned, not in the pleasant, warming way of blood wine, but with a sharp, chemical intensity that made his throat constrict. His enhanced metabolism immediately began processing the unfamiliar toxin, but he could already feel it affecting his nervous system. Beside him, Ysara coughed violently after her drink, while Hagara's eyes widened in scientific fascination even as she gasped. "Fascinating," she wheezed. "I can feel it targeting my neurotransmitter receptors. Highly efficient delivery mechanism." The humans were having their own reactions to the blood wine. Lucas maintained composure, though his skin had developed a noticeable flush. Samantha coughed once, then nodded appreciatively. Igor seemed the least affected, smacking his lips with apparent enjoyment. "Not bad," the broad human declared. "Reminds me of something we have back on Earth called Bloody Mary, though significantly more potent." "Another round?" Lucas suggested, and despite his better judgment, Husser found himself nodding. By the third exchange of drinks, the effects were becoming pronounced. Trodarian metabolism, evolved to process a wide range of toxins, was struggling with the unfamiliar ethanol. Husser found his normally perfect balance compromised, while Ysara had become increasingly vocal about her superior Trodarian constitution. A sure sign the whiskey was affecting her. Hagara, intriguingly, had begun taking notes on her portable datapad, though her typically precise scientific observations were becoming increasingly disjointed and interspersed with exclamations about molecular structures. The humans were showing signs of impairment as well. Lucas' carefully measured speech had developed a slight slur. Samantha was giggling at things that weren't particularly humorous, and Igor had begun singing what Husser assumed was a human battle song, though the translation was spotty. It was during this increasingly boisterous exchange that Husser became aware of the tavern's atmosphere changing. The attention they had attracted earlier had evolved from nervous observation to active interest. Several tables of mixed species had begun placing what appeared to be wagers on the contest, calling out encouragement or jeers. "They're betting on us," he informed the group, his usually sharp senses somewhat dulled. "Of course they are," Lucas replied with a loose wave. Nothing more entertaining than watching apex predators make fools of themselves. levels the playing field. No one makes a fool of a Trodarian, Ysara declared, attempting to stand and nearly toppling the reinforced table. We are the galaxy's ultimate survivors. Second ultimate, Igor corrected, raising his glass in what might have been a toast or simply an attempt to maintain balance. Earth is pretty ultimate too. What began as good-natured competition was shifting into something else, a public spectacle that was drawing unwanted attention. Husser might have ended it there, had he been sober enough to assert proper authority. Instead, he found himself caught up in the moment, a rare experience of camaraderie with another species that understood what it meant to evolve on a world that constantly tried to kill you. To Deathworlds, he roared, raising his glass of whiskey in a toast that caused several nearby herbivore species to flee in terror. To Deathworlds, the humans echoed, downing their blood wine with reckless abandon. It was at this peak of intoxicated fellowship that the incident began. A group of Harrops, emboldened by their own intoxicants and the perceived vulnerability of the normally fearsome predators, approached their alcove. Not so intimidating now, are you? The lead Harrop chittered, its large eyes blinking rapidly with nervous courage. Big scary Deathworlders can't handle their drinks. Under normal circumstances, such an approach would have been unthinkable. Even an intoxicated Trodarian was more than capable of dismembering a Harrop with minimal effort. But the bizarre cross-species drinking contest had created an unusual situation. Predators with dulled reflexes and confused nervous systems. Ysara growled, the sound slurred but still threatening enough to make the Harrops step back. You want to test that theory, little prey? Husser cautioned, though his own coordination was compromised enough that his restraining hand missed her arm entirely. The lead Harrop, perhaps realizing it had made a tactical error, began backing away. But others in the tavern, sensing weakness in species they normally feared, were becoming emboldened. I lost 50 credits betting on the lizards, a multi-eyed Quillian complained loudly. Thought they'd outlast the softskins for sure. Lizards? Ysara repeated, scales darkening dangerously. Did that walking pincushion just call us lizards? Lucas, despite his intoxication, seemed to recognize the deteriorating situation. Perhaps we should settle our tab and continue this gathering elsewhere. Too late, Igor muttered, nodding toward the tavern's entrance where several fronds were blocking the exit, their leafy appendages waving in what appeared to be agitation. The Trodarians attacked first on Outpost 7. One of them was proclaiming, "Never trust a predator species." "That's historically inaccurate," Hagara objected, attempting to stand and deliver what would undoubtedly have been a detailed lecture on Trodarian Federation relations. Instead, she stumbled against the table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking glass acted as a catalyst. The Harrops, startled, emitted their species' alarm cry, a high-pitched squeal that triggered panic responses in several other herbivore species. A glasswing knocked over a serving drone in its haste to retreat, sending trays of food scattering across the floor. "Watch the scales, beady eyes," Ysara snarled as a panicked Quillian bumped into her. The Quillian, terrified, extended its defensive spines reflexively, one of which grazed Ysara's arm, drawing a thin line of dark Trodarian blood. Husser saw the situation unraveling in slow motion, his tactical mind working even through the haze of human whiskey. They were outnumbered, in unfamiliar territory, intoxicated, and now physically provoked. This was about to become a diplomatic incident of galactic proportions. Before he could intervene, however, the situation escalated beyond his control. "She's been injured. The Deathworlder is bleeding," someone shouted, triggering more panic. In the confusion, a frond swung one of its heavier appendages toward Hagara, perhaps attempting to create space, perhaps with more hostile intent. The blow never landed. With surprising speed for an intoxicated being, Lucas inserted himself between Hagara and the frond, catching the leafy limb with a solid grip. That, the human said with deadly clarity that cut through his previous intoxication, was a mistake. What happened next occurred with such rapidity that even Husser's predator reflexes could barely track it. The human security specialist, Igor, vaulted over an overturned table and planted himself beside Ysura, facing outward toward the increasingly hostile crowd. Samantha had somehow produced a small device from her clothing that emitted a high-pitched sound, disorienting several approaching herbivores. In that moment, Husser realized the humans were not attacking the Trodarians, as he might have expected from competing predators. They were defending them. Back to back, Lucas commanded, an order that needed no translation. Instinctively, the Trodarians shifted, forming a defensive circle with the humans. It was a hunter's formation, one that any predator species would recognize, protecting vulnerabilities by presenting only fangs and claws outward. "This is going to complicate our membership application," Samantha commented dryly, the device in her hand humming with energy. "Diplomacy was getting boring anyway," Igor replied, his stance balanced despite the alcohol. "Been too long since a good bar fight." The tavern had descended into chaos. What had begun as targeted aggression toward the predator species had devolved into a general melee, with old grievances and species rivalries erupting across the establishment. The Xerxian proprietor was frantically activating security protocols, but the damage was already done. Aquilian rushed their position, spines extended. Husser prepared to intercept, but Ysura, despite her intoxication, moved faster, her claws slashing with precision that belied her compromised state. The Aquilian retreated, spines drooping. "On your left," Igor called to Husser, who turned in time to see a heavy-set frond wielding what appeared to be a makeshift club fashioned from broken furniture. Before Husser could react, the human had tackled the much larger being, using leverage rather than brute strength to bring it down. It was a fighting style Husser had never observed. Not the raw power of Trodarians, but something equally effective in its precision. "They fight well," Ysura observed with grudging respect, deflecting another attacker with a sweeping tail strike. "For softskins. Less talking, more surviving," Lucas replied, ducking beneath a thrown object that shattered against the wall behind them. For several chaotic minutes, the two predator species fought side by side against the tide of panicked and aggressive herbivores. Despite their physiological differences, they found an unexpected synergy, Trodarians providing raw strength and intimidation, humans contributing speed and tactical adaptability. When a Harap attempted to flank their position, Hagara, the least combat-oriented of the Trodarians, surprised everyone by calculating the perfect angle to overturn their heavy table, creating a barricade that trapped the would-be attacker. "Nice move, Professor," Samantha called out, her scientific demeanor now replaced by focused combat awareness. Throughout the tavern, word began to spread that the unimaginable had happened. Two apex predator species were fighting together rather than against each other. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. "They're cooperating," a panicked glasswing shrieked, its transparent abdomen clouding with fear chemicals. "The Deathworlders have formed an alliance." The very notion sent ripples of terror through the crowd. One predator species was dangerous enough to avoid. Two working in concert? Unthinkable. "Federation security is coming," Lucas announced, somehow sensing the approaching authorities before anyone else. "We need to move." "Where?" Husser demanded, knocking aside Aquilian who had unwisely attempted to scale their barricade. "Follow me," the human replied. "I know a back exit." Under normal circumstances, Husser would never have followed another species' tactical lead, especially not a potential rival predator. But the whiskey, the unexpected camaraderie of combat, and the approaching security forces made this an exceptional situation. "Ysura, Hagara, with me," he ordered, falling in behind the humans as they carved a path toward the rear of the establishment. Igor led the way, moving with surprising agility for his size, clearing smaller obstacles with leaps that suggested Earth's lower gravity had its advantages. Samantha kept pace in the middle, occasionally deploying her sonic device to discourage pursuit. Lucas brought up the human rear, coordinating their retreat with hand signals that were intuitively clear even to the Trodarians. They burst through a service entrance into a narrow alley behind the tavern, the sounds of chaos and approaching security sirens fading behind them. For a moment, the six beings, 3 humans, 3 Trodarians, simply stood catching their breath, the absurdity of their situation settling over them. Then Ysara began to laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that started in her chest and built to a full roar. Igor joined in first, his baritone mixing with her deeper tones. Soon all 6 were giving voice to the bizarre hilarity of Deathworlders united in a bar brawl against the softer species of the galaxy. "Did you see that frond when you caught its swing?" Ysara asked Lucas between fits of laughter. "I thought its leaves would fall off from shock." "Not as good as Hagara's table flip," Samantha countered, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "Perfect physics application in combat. It was a simple calculation of mass and leverage," Hagara replied with mock academic dignity, before dissolving into another fit of laughter. When their amusement finally subsided, Husser found himself regarding the humans with new respect. They had proven themselves in combat, not equal to Trodarians in raw strength, perhaps, but formidable in their own way. More importantly, they had stood with Trodarians rather than against them when conflict erupted. "We should move," Lucas suggested, glancing toward the street where the glow of emergency lights was becoming visible. "Security will be looking for 2 groups of Deathworlders. My diplomatic residence has extraterritorial status," Husser offered. "They cannot enter without permission from the Trodarian government. Lead the way." Lucas agreed with a nod of respect that acknowledged Husser's superior knowledge of their current terrain. As they navigated through Neuter City's less reputable districts, taking side streets and service corridors to avoid detection, Husser found himself walking alongside Lucas while the others paired off, Hagara with Samantha, engaged in animated scientific discussion despite their recent combat and lingering intoxication. Ysara with Igor, comparing fighting techniques with enthusiastic gestures. "Your people fought well," Husser acknowledged, the words coming easier than he might have expected. "Different style than ours, but effective." "Adaptability over specialization," Lucas replied. "Earth never let us become too specialized. Too many different threats requiring different responses. Trodaria favored strength and regeneration. Our world attacks mainly through gravity, atmospheric toxins, and large predators. Direct threats requiring direct counters." They walked in companionable silence for a moment before Lucas spoke again. "You know what this means, don't you? For both our species and the Federation." Husser considered. The political implications were significant. They've always managed us by isolation. The unique Deathworlders, feared but contained. 2 such species, especially if aligned. "Changes everything," Lucas finished. The diplomatic residence provided to the Trodarian delegation was a fortress-like structure on the outskirts of the diplomatic quarter, designed not only to withstand Trodarian mass, but to provide security appropriate for beings that many Federation species instinctively feared. Its walls were thick, its entrance reinforced, and its interior equipped with furnishings that could support Trodarian physiology. After confirming they hadn't been followed, Husser led the group inside, activating the environmental controls to accommodate their guests. The humans appeared to find Trodarian standard temperature comfortable enough, though the higher gravity settings were reduced to a compromised level. "I would offer you something to drink," Husser said dryly, "but perhaps we've had enough cross-species toxicology for one night." "Water would be appreciated," Samantha replied with a smile that suggested humans recovered from intoxication more quickly than expected. "And perhaps opportunity to learn more about Trodaria? The Federation databases are frustratingly vague." Hagara immediately brightened, always eager to discuss scientific matters. "I'd be delighted to share. And perhaps you could tell us more about Earth's biosphere? Your adaptations suggest fascinating evolutionary pressures." While the 2 scientists settled into what promised to be an extensive exchange, Ysara activated the residence's security feeds to ensure they hadn't been followed. Igor joined her, his security training evidently recognizing the tactical value of maintaining perimeter awareness. This left Husser and Lucas to address the larger implications of the night's events. Federation security will have recorded the incident, Husser noted, providing Lucas with water in a reinforced container designed for the less durable physiology of non-Trodarians. There will be diplomatic consequences. For both our species, Lucas agreed, accepting the drink with a nod of thanks. Though perhaps not the consequences they're expecting. Explain. Lucas leaned back in his chair, a human gesture of relaxation that Husser was beginning to recognize. The Federation has always operated on a principle of balance between competing interests. Herbivore majority maintaining control through numbers, while respecting the strength of exceptions like Trodarians. And now humans, Husser added. Exactly. They were prepared for us individually. But tonight demonstrated something they hadn't considered, that predator species might find common ground, might even cooperate. The implication was clear. Together, two Deathworld species would represent a significant shift in the Federation's careful power balance. You're suggesting an alliance, Husser stated directly. Lucas nodded. Of a sort. Not against the Federation. We both want membership for our own reasons. But an understanding between our peoples. Mutual respect. Cultural exchange. Perhaps even joint ventures on worlds too harsh for other species to exploit. It was a bold proposal, one that would have seemed unthinkable mere hours ago. Trodarians had long considered themselves unique, the sole apex species of the galaxy. Sharing that position went against generations of cultural pride. Yet Husser could not deny the potential advantages. Humans and Trodarians clearly had complementary strengths. Where Trodarians had evolved physical power, humans had developed adaptability. Trodarian immune systems excelled against pathogens, while humans showed remarkable toxin resistance. Before he could respond, Hagara's excited voice interrupted from across the room. Husser, you must hear this. Earth has over 30 distinct biomes and 14 major climate zones. The adaptive pressure on human evolution must have been extraordinary. And Trodaria's atmospheric composition would be lethal to most oxygen breathers, Samantha added with equal enthusiasm. Yet your respiratory system not only tolerates it, but extracts efficiency improvements. From the security station, Ysara called out, their combat techniques are fascinating, Husser. They've developed fighting styles specifically designed to overcome stronger opponents. Igor has been showing me the principles. The security specialist grinned, rubbing what would likely become a bruise where Ysara had evidently tested these techniques. Your mate is a quick study. Nearly dislocated my shoulder on the third attempt. Watching his sister and his mate engage so naturally with these aliens, Husser felt something shift in his perspective. Perhaps true strength wasn't in isolation, but in finding worthy allies. Perhaps the Trodarian way had always been too focused on self-reliance. I believe, he said carefully to Lucas, that we have much to discuss regarding future cooperation. But first, tell me more about your Earth. What made it a crucible for such a surprising species? For hours, they talked, not as diplomatic counterparts or competing predators, but as beings who shared the rare experience of evolving on worlds that should have killed them. Lucas described Earth's endless diversity of threats, diseases that mutated constantly, predators that hunted through stealth rather than just power, terrain that ranged from scorching deserts to frozen wastes. In turn, Husser explained Trodaria's brutal simplicity, crushing gravity that demanded powerful bodies, toxic atmosphere that required advanced filtration biology, and massive predators that could only be survived through thick armor and regenerative tissues. Two death worlds, one demanding adaptability and cunning, the other requiring strength and resilience. Two evolutionary paths to the same outcome. Species that could not only survive, but thrive in environments that would kill most sentient beings in minutes. Your world sounds efficient, Lucas commented after Husser described Trodarian mating rituals, which involved tests of strength against natural hazards. Direct challenges with direct solutions. And yours sounds chaotic, Husser replied without rancor. Constantly changing threats requiring constant adaptation. Maybe that's why we complement each other, Lucas suggested. Your people mastered power, mine mastered change. From across the room, where Hagara and Samantha were displaying biological data on a holographic projector, Hagara called out, "The biological exchange possibilities alone are staggering. Trodarian medicine could revolutionize human treatment of physical trauma, while human adaptive immunology could improve our response to novel pathogens. And think of the worlds we could access together," Ysara added, her earlier combat eagerness transformed into expansionist enthusiasm. "Planets neither of our species could claim alone might be conquerable through cooperation." "Not conquered," Igor corrected gently. "Explored. Developed." Yes, whatever term the Federation prefers," Ysara agreed with a dismissive wave that suggested the distinction was merely semantic to her. As dawn approached on Neuter, painting the diplomatic quarter in the light of its 3 suns, Husser found himself contemplating a future he had never imagined. Trodarians had always stood alone. The unique Deathworlders, feared and respected, but fundamentally isolated. The notion of a genuine ally, a species that truly understood what it meant to be forged in fire, was revolutionary. "There will be resistance," he noted to Lucas as they watched the sunrise from the residence's reinforced balcony. "Many in the Federation will fear what our cooperation represents." "Let them fear," Lucas replied simply. "Fear can be the beginning of respect. And those who move past fear might discover benefits they never imagined," Husser added, thinking of the scientific exchange Hagara was already planning with Samantha. Medicines, technologies, resource extraction from worlds currently deemed too hostile. Lucas nodded. "The Federation needs what Deathworlders can provide. They just never expected us to provide it together." A notification chimed on Husser's communication device. "Security alert," he noted, checking the message. "They've identified all 6 of us from the tavern incident. Official inquiries are being prepared." Rather than concern, Lucas displayed a subtle smile. "Perfect timing. You find diplomatic incidents amusing. I find opportunities interesting," the human corrected. "Think about it. This forces the Federation Council to address our 2 species directly, together, rather than maintaining the separation they've preferred." Husser saw the strategy immediately. A joint hearing, a unified defense, precedent for treating our species as allies rather than isolated threats. Exactly. Lucas extended his hand in the human greeting gesture they had exchanged earlier, to the beginning of a productive relationship between Deathworlders. After only a moment's hesitation, Husser clasped the offered hand, careful not to pierce the human's softer skin with his claws. "To survival, adaptation, and strength, whether it comes from scales or creativity." When the Federation security officers arrived 2 hours later, they found an unprecedented sight: Trodarians and humans seated together, not as reluctant diplomatic counterparts, but as allied interests preparing a joint statement on the previous night's regrettable misunderstanding. The political aftershocks would reverberate through the Federation for cycles to come. The carefully maintained balance of power, which had always counted on predator species remaining isolated minorities, now faced the prospect of Deathworlders who had discovered common ground. As they departed for the council chambers to face the diplomatic inquest, Husser noticed how the crowds on Neuter's streets still parted before them, perhaps even more dramatically than before. The sight of Trodarians and humans walking side by side, neither deferring to the other, created an impression of united power that sent herbivore species scurrying for cover. "They're more afraid than ever," he observed to Lucas. "For now," the human agreed. "But fear can become respect, and respect can become cooperation. A long-term strategy," Husser noted with approval. "Deathworlders understand patience," Lucas replied. "Our planet's taught us that survival often depends on timing." As they approached the towering council building, its biometal architecture gleaming in the morning light, Husser felt something he had rarely experienced in Federation space: genuine optimism about the future. For generations, Trodarians had maintained their proud isolation, secure in their status as the galaxy's ultimate survivors. Now, they had discovered they were not alone. Another species had walked the crucible path and emerged strengthened rather than consumed. Different approaches, different adaptations, but the same indomitable will to overcome worlds that should have killed them. Ready to make history? Lucas asked as they paused before the ornate entrance. Husser looked at the human, so different physically from a Trodarian, yet so similar in spirit, and felt the weight of generations shift toward a new possibility. History, he replied with certainty, will never be the same. The great doors of the council chamber swung open, and together, Trodarians and humans, the galaxy's Deathworlders united. They stepped forward into a future neither species could have imagined alone. Behind them, a staff member whispered to another in awe and terror. They were frightening enough separately. Together, the galaxy doesn't stand a chance. But perhaps, Husser thought as they entered the chamber of diplomacy rather than combat, that was precisely what the galaxy needed. Not conquerors, but survivors who understood better than any others the true cost and meaning of adaptation, strength, and persistence against all odds. For what were Deathworlders, if not the ultimate proof that life would find a way, not just to exist, but to thrive in even the most hostile environments the universe could create? And if two such species could find common ground despite their differences, perhaps there was hope for cooperation across even the widest evolutionary divides. Either way, the age of the isolated Deathworlder had ended. The era of Deathworlder alliance had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months later, the informal alliance between humans and Trodarians had become formalized through a series of joint scientific, commercial, and security ventures. The Federation Council, initially alarmed by the cooperation between Deathworlders, had gradually recognized the benefits of channeling their combined strengths toward Federation interests rather than trying to keep them separated. In the newly established joint embassy on Neuter, Husser stood beside Lucas, watching as Hagara and Samantha presented their latest research, a revolutionary medical technology combining Trodarian regenerative biology with human adaptive immunology. They work well together, Lucas observed as the two scientists enthusiastically described potential applications for species across the Federation. As do we all, Husser replied. Though I'm still not convinced about this coffee substance your people insist on consuming each morning. Lucas laughed. Says the being who drinks fermented blood for breakfast. From another corner of the embassy, the sound of combat training could be heard. Ysara and Igor continuing their cultural exchange of fighting techniques. What had begun as competitive demonstration had evolved into genuine mutual respect, each species learning from the other's approach to survival. Outside the embassy windows, Husser could see Federation citizens still giving the building a wide berth, their instinctive fear of apex predators not yet overcome. But now, occasionally, representatives from other species would approach with purpose rather than terror, seeking the unique expertise that only Deathworlders could provide for certain problems. The Glasswings want our help with their colony on Frostheim, Husser mentioned, reviewing a recent diplomatic request. The environment is too harsh for their workers, but might be manageable with a joint human Trodarian support team. From feared to sought after, Lucas mused. Progress. They still fear us, Husser noted. Yes, but now they're learning that fear and respect can coexist with cooperation. Lucas turned from the window to face his Trodarian counterpart. Our ancestors evolved on worlds that demanded everything from them. Strength, adaptability, to survive against impossible odds. But perhaps the greatest adaptation of all is learning when to compete and when to cooperate. Husser contemplated this wisdom that echoed his own emerging philosophy. The universe had forged Trodarians and humans separately, through fire and challenge and the constant threat of extinction. It had created beings who refused to yield, who faced the impossible and conquered it through different but equally effective means. And now, those separately forged weapons had found their greatest strength in alliance. To Deathworlders, Husser said, raising a glass of water in a toast that had become tradition between them. To Deathworlders, Lucas echoed. and to proving that even the harshest beginnings can lead to the most promising futures. Beyond the embassy walls, the Federation continued its cautious dance of diplomacy and species relations. But within, a new understanding had been born, that those who survive the unsurvivable have more in common than any external differences could ever overcome. They had thought they were the only Deathworlders until they met humans. Now, neither species would walk alone again.